Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Torah studies and this week's Parsha of Vaeschanan. And the subject matter today is when everything finally clicks. No more in one ear, out the other. You know, this is a problem. Many times we face this problem. We hear things and it says, yes, yes, yes. I know this is things you can hear it from children, you can hear it from spouses. Did you hear what I said? Yes, yes, yes. Goes in one ear, goes out to the other ear. So tonight, we want to talk about this concept of hearing, but really hearing. In Yiddish, there is a saying, there is a word to hear, we say heren. Heren means to hear. There is something a word in Yiddish that I don't think we can find a translation in English or any other language, and that is der Herrn. What does der Herrn mean? Der Herrn means like I said, I don't have a translation for it, but I can describe it. It is like getting it. It's like you hear, but you absorb it. You really connect to it. It's a different type of hearing. And this is something that in Hasidus it talks about a lot. The Friedrich Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, talks about it. How we are supposed to be able to hear and to der Herr, to heaven and to der Herrn. And this is something that helps you both in life, whether it's parents and children, whether it's with friends, whether it's with a spouse, to be able to the hair, to feel somebody else, to connect. And of course, it is also in reference to absorbing and connecting of Hashem and this world to us, connect to the Torah, to the mitzvahs, and so on. So let's start. We'll start with a story that the previous Rebbe related about a chassid who was not very scholarly, and the other chassidim saw him praying in length, in like with excitement and hours, and is like all into it. And we know in general by Chabad, the idea of praying is a whole work for itself. Praying is not just coming in synagogue, you put on the tefillin, you pray, the minyan, which is amazing. But the real praying is connecting. And to connect is to der Herrn, to hear and to absorb. So this chassid was praying like the biggest scholar. And he wasn't just faking it, but he was really, really praying long and hard and meditating. And the Hasidim asked him, why? What are you praying with? What is it that you think? They obviously knew that he's not the person with the greatest level of scholarship. So they asked him, what exactly are you thinking while you're praying? It wasn't the stock market then, it wasn't the news, he didn't have the Twitter or Facebook, but he was praying with all his kaiches, all of his everything. So he said, I'm praying with a message that I once heard from the Rebbe. What was the message? He heard one statement from his Rebbe, and the statement was, Zacher v'shamer bedibur echad. That is one of the 10 commandments, which is also we're reading in this week's Torah portion. One of the 10 commandments is Zacher es yom Shabbos lekacher. Remember the holy day of Shabbos to keep. We know the Ten Commandments is written in two places. One in the book of Exodus, and the second time is in this week's Torah portion. And this commandment about Shabbos is written differently. In the Exodus, it says, Zachar es yom Shabbos lekatrei, remember to keep the holiday of Shabbos. In our portion, Vaeschanan, it says, Shomer, you should guard, you should guard the holiday of Shabbos. So our sages tell us that Zachar v'Shomer b'dibur echad, that when God said these words, Zachar et Yom Shabbos lekatrei, and Shomer, remember the holiday of Shabbos, and keep the holiday of Shabbos, God said it at one time, which is impossible to understand. It is only when God is speaking in that way, he's able to say both things at once. So this is the simple meaning of that statement. Zachar v'Shomer b'dibur echad, that the Zachar and Shomer was said at one time. But the Alter Rebbe once gave another interpretation, and he made a very short statement. And he said it was in a way it's playing on words. But he said Zachar, remember, Shomer, always keep, bedibur. Bedibur means a speak, when you speak. Bedibur echad. You should always remember the echad, the one Hashem. In every word that you utter, you should remember the words of Hashem, the one Hashem. And that's what the Chassid said. That's what I pray with. I pray with every word that I say, I think about one Hashem. This is something which really is unbelievable. That a person should be able to concentrate and to connect to this one concept in a way that has nothing else in the world, Hashem. And to be able to focus on it for so long, this is what we call der Herr. He got it. He's connecting to it. We're gonna look at it and we're gonna see it inside. Just a second. Let me just share this. Okay, so here's the story was once related to me in writing. There was once a chassid who would pray at length. It was an exceedingly simple fellow who in some places did not even know the basic meanings of the words. Still, he would pray at length. It was evident from his prayer that there were no mere lip services. He was really praying, and he prayed with all of his energy. The other Hasidim were amazed when they asked him, how could he pray so intently if he didn't know the meaning of the words? He was saying, the words he was saying, he didn't know what the meanings. So he answered, I only pray what I heard from the Rebbe. That is a comment the Rebbe made on the words on the Shabbat liturgy. Remember and observe where were heard in one utterance. In the commandment to remember and observe the day of Shabbat. On this, our Rebbe expanded, in your every utterance, remember and observe the one. Always remember the one Hashem. I say, with this single idea that he heard from the Rebbe, he prayed for 40 years, day and night. Imagine that. 40 years he was praying with this one statement. The guy didn't know Hebrew. He didn't know how to explain anything. But he heard a message from the Rebbe, and he got it. And he connected to it for 40 years. We need to appreciate this. And to truly appreciate it, to fully depict it, as my father would say, that the inspiration of a single thought is all you need to pray for 40 years, day and night, Sunday, Monday, Shabbos, and holidays. This is Chassidus. Not only to hear, but to der Herr. This is the Yiddish. To der Herr. So, what does that mean? it means that a person is able to connect to something. It is really echoed in this week's Torah portion. In this week's Torah portion, as we said, we talk about the 10 Commandments, and the Torah describes about the 10 Commandments some events that took place during this event of the giving of the 10 Commandments. And there is one statement that the Torah says that has different interpretations, and that is the voice of Hashem that came out. As it says, Velo Yasaf. Lo Yasaf means it didn't continue, or as other interpretation has it, as we'll see inside. Says the Torah, Et advarim ha'ele diber Hashem al kol ka'alchem. God spoke these words to your entire assembly at the mountain, out of the midst of the fire, the clouds, and the opaque darkness, with a great voice which did not cease. And he inscribed them on 2 stone tablets and gave them to me. Now, what exactly does it mean when we're saying these words, that it was a great voice that did not cease? What does it mean, the voice that didn't cease? So there's actually different opinions that is brought in the Talmud. It's brought in the Medrash. Says the Medrash as follows. God spoke these words to your entire assembly with a great voice which did not cease. So now we have one opinion, says, Rabbi Vaeschanan says, the one voice split into 7 voices, which then split into 70 languages. So that's one thing, one interpretation. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said, every prophet throughout history had prophesied from this voice. Okay? Those are 2 interpretations. And now we have a 3rd interpretation. The rabbis said, this is the majority of the rabbis present, they said it did not have an echo. Okay? So we have here 3 different interpretations. And let's think about this for a moment. We have the interpretation that it didn't, the voice didn't cease, that it split into 7 parts and then 70 languages. It is a miracle, it is something, but we can understand, we can appreciate that the voice of God is split to different languages. Fine. The other interpretation, that it says that the prophets received their prophecy from this voice until, the end of days, I can also appreciate. But what about the 3rd interpretation? The 3rd interpretation, that it didn't have an echo. What exactly does it mean? What exactly does it tell us? That the voice of God didn't have an echo. So, what is it trying to show over here? I mean, this is a powerful voice. Obviously, we're talking about a voice of God. But a voice of God, if you have a powerful voice, you should have an echo. And here, God perhaps made a miracle that didn't have an echo. But what exactly is the point of it? So that is a question that the Rebbe asks this question. Let's see it inside. He says, this must be better understood. How does the 3rd interpretation, that the voice did not have an echo, express the greatness and the limitlessness of the voice of the 10 Commandments? The other 2 interpretations that we said express the limitlessness that the voice of God kept on. But the fact that it didn't have an echo, how exactly does that express the limitlessness of the voice of the Ten Commandments. According to the first two interpretations, the greatness of the voice is easily demonstrated. It was neither limited to the holy tongue of Hebrew, nor to the time of the giving of the Torah. Instead, it extended down and was diffused to every tongue and in every generation. So that makes sense. But that it did not have an echo, however, would not appear to demonstrate the voice's strength. To the contrary, the stronger the voice, the stronger the echo. Since that voice had no echo, this would in fact indicate that it would seem its weakness. So what exactly is the point here? So here is an interesting explanation that the Rebbe gives. But before we're going to go to the explanation, it is just to give an introduction about the fact that how our energy can have an effect on ourselves. It can have an effect on our surroundings. It can also have an effect on physical objects, and even on physical objects. You know, it's interesting that there's a Talmud that relates an interesting story that a certain Galilean elder was assumed to possess a certain knowledge. And how was he getting this knowledge? Says the Talmud, simply due to the fact that he possessed a great a staff of the great sage Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir was one of the greatest Tanaim, the sages of the Mishnah. And he had his staff, and because of his staff, holding his staff, he had knowledge. Let's see it inside in the Talmud. It says, the staff of Rabbi Meir was in his hand and would impart to him knowledge. It's really, really, you know, it's amazing to say something like this. But there's also something similar that the Talmud tells us about how careful one needs to be when you're talking, whatever you say, whatever you do. So the Talmud tells us that the voice, the beams of the house will testify. Look at this Talmud here. Lest one will say, who is there to testify against me? The very stones of his house and its beams testify against him. And it is written, for the stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer it. I think once, I remember once a story, someone came once to, it was like a synagogue. I think it was in the Lower East Side. So I just remember the story that he sensed the voices of the Chazanim, the people that throughout the years, the Chazanim who prayed in this synagogue. He really heard the voices in the beams. You know, there's a custom also that where some people have a custom that when they pass away, they are buried with the table that they were sitting on and studying Torah, or a table, they make from that table, they make a coffin. That is a custom. Even the Rebbe also, we had the coffin they made for the Rebbe was from the table he was sitting and studying and praying. And why is that? Because really the wood absorbs the spirituality. And we find another thing also. This is what we said. It became an accepted practice. This is from Rabbi Bechayeb, and he says that it became an accepted practice among the pious Jews of France to construct the casket out of the wood of the tables to demonstrate that man does not take anything with him into the world to come, and that his efforts in this world bring him no merit, save the charitable deeds he performed while alive, and the generosity he performed at his table, feeding and hosting those in need. And as I said before, some people did also with a table that they would study Torah. This is also why the sages said, he who spends a long time over his meal will have his life extended. And here there's another story that it brings. We go to the next text. This comes from Rabbi Tzvi Hirsch, from the Kava Yashe. He was a sage from the 16th century. And he said, I once saw a tailor in the holy community of Brisk in Lithuania instruct the burial society before his death to construct his coffin out of his work table and place his stick with which he would measure the fabric in his hand. When they asked him the reason for this request, he explained that his work table and yardstick were his faithful witnesses, that in his entire life, he had never stolen anything from his working materials. Fortunate is he for wishing to benefit only from the work of his hands and not from theft. So here again, we see this concept, the idea that he's asking the physical matter to be sort of testifying for him. So what does that mean? This explains the idea of the echo. That we ask the question that God, when he spoke on the Mount Sinai, our sages said that the word had no echo. Why? Because what is an echo? How does an echo come? You're walking to an empty room. If you go showing an apartment for rent, you would go into the room and you speak and you hear an echo. An empty room gives you an echo. But then once you bring in the furniture, you put in a carpet and you put in draperies and other things, then there's no echo. Why? Because the echo is when there is not enough things to absorb the voice, and the voice bounces back off the walls. So, but when you have something that absorbs the voice, there is no echo. So here's the idea. You see, God's words and the Mount Sinai was meant to be heard and to be absorbed in every little part of this physical world. It is a strong, powerful voice, but it didn't bounce back. It didn't have an echo. It did not bounce back. Why? Because it was absorbed in every part of this world. This is why this voice of Hashem did not have an echo. Let's see how the Rebbe says it. When God declared, Anochi, I am the Lord your God, it was with a great voice. Nothing was able to stop it. So that it saturated the entire world, even the inanimate realms. Everything became infused and permeated with the sound of Anochi, I am Hashem. Therefore, by the rules of nature, the 10 Commandments could not have an echo. The reason it had no echo was not because God's voice was weak, but on the contrary, because it was such a powerful voice. For this reason, it did not carry on and did not have an echo, because it was so powerful. So, This explains this whole idea. Now, what does this have to do with me? How does this concept that we have discussed, the absence of an echo at Sinai, what does it have to do with us? And the answer is because that is the message that God is giving us with the Ten Commandments. The message is that I want my voice to penetrate to each and every one of you, to the point that will have no echo, will be absorbed in every little part of it. And we do find it by our first father Abraham, as the Alter Rebbe explains this, and a verse that the Torah says about our father Abraham. It says, our father Abraham, God said, I promise him the reward. Why? Because he hearkened to my voice. He listened to me. But the words that the Torah uses to describe how Abraham listened to the voice of God is a rather unusual word that is used. Let's see it inside. Here says the Torah, Eikev asher shama Avram bekoili vayishmor mishmati mitzvosech u'kosav v'sovasei. God said, I will keep the promise to Avram. Why? Because Avram hearkened to my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my instructions. Now here, the word that is used, as you see here, is Eikev. Eikev means because. But Eikev is not the usual word for because. Because you say ki, ba'avur, mipnei. Eikev is an unusual word that is used. And Eikev also has another meaning. Eikev means the hill. Says the Alter Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe quotes it. He says, my grandfather, while still a child being educated by the Alter Rebbe, this was the Tzemach Tzedek, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe. He says, once asked him to translate the verse, because Abraham hearkened to my voice. The Alter Rebbe answered him, through the test of the binding of Isaac, and through all of his other tests, Avram came to their hair, to observe their hair, not just to hear, but to their hair, God's command, with every aspect of his being, from his head, through his body, all the way down to his feet. That was the power of Abraham. He connected to the words of Hashem to the point that his feet automatically followed the words of Hashem. I was driving today, Chanel and my daughter, back from school. And we're driving, there's lights and this. And Chanel tells me, Tata, it's amazing how this one light controls so many people. So many people around the world. Everybody is a red light, people stop. A green light, people go. There is certain things that you absorb, and it becomes like second nature by you. What do you mean? Of course, yeah. A red light means stop. A green light means you can go. And I told Chana, I'm going to use it today in the class to give an example, to explain this concept. What it means that sometimes there's certain things that you hear, but you hear it and you say, okay, I heard it, fine, it's beautiful. Does it change you? Does it necessarily make you change your ways? No, not necessarily. But sometimes you hear something and you absorb it and you connect to it, you derher. It's like, for some people, for most people, when you'll give him something to eat on Yom Kippur, they'll say, there's nothing even to consider. I'm not going to eat on Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, you fast. It is because this is so obvious. I told the story a few times. A colleague of mine was in a supermarket, and he sees a black lady, telling her child, um, when it was in the supermarket by the candies, and she tells the child, "Don't touch it; it's not kosher." So he went over to her and says, "Excuse me, are you Jewish?" He says, "No." She says, "What do you say? Was you keep kosher? You tell your child it's not kosher?" She says, "No, we don't keep kosher. It just I happen to see that every time my Jewish neighbors, they go with the children, and then they want them not to touch anything. They tell them, no, don't touch it. It's not kosher." And it works. I figure that I can do the same. You tell a child something it's not kosher, there's no debate about it. There's no question. It's not. It is so connected. The child is so absorbed with the concept that if it's not kosher, you don't have it. So it becomes connected to it. And the truth is that this is something that is a life work. Something we have to, an entire life, to work on this concept that when you hear something, you got to absorb it. You have to absorb it. You have to connect to it. This helps us with our relationships, with our spouses. If you really listen to what your wife said, you really listen to what your husband said, you listen and you absorb, and it changes you. And the same thing with everything what you have in life. With this, and obviously this is when we're talking about the Torah. When you connect to what the Torah tells us, it is not easy, but you work on it. Like this chassid who 40 years prayed with these words. Remember and keep in every utterance the echad, the one God. So we're going to conclude with one of the message that the Friedrich Rebbe writes here. Our father Abraham, with the sacrifices he made, in his work publicizing godliness in the world, so refined himself, his character, and his body, that even his heel would hear the call of God to a far greater degree than even the head of a great intellectual. You get that? His feet was more connected than the head, the brains of a great intellectual. With his head, the intellectual might hear. With his heel, Abraham could hear. He could connect to it. They tell a story also about the Rebbe Rashab. And there was once that he was doing something, and it was in presence of another great rabbi. And the rabbi asked him, "Tell me, what's the source? What's the source? Why do you do what you do?" And he said, "At the moment, I don't remember the source, but," he says to him, "I trained my body from the age of bar mitzvah to follow the words of God, to follow halacha. So my body is already trained to follow halacha. So if I'm doing it, it must be that this is the right thing. It must be that this is halachically correct." And there is a story also about, I think it was Chernobyl, one of the Chernobyl, Rabbi Nachum Chernobyl, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong. In any case, they said they were serving milk on the table, and he was asking for milk. And they told him, "There's milk on the table," and he just didn't see the milk. And before long, somebody came running into the room, and he said, "Don't touch that milk. That milk is not Chalav Israel. It's not milk that was milked while a Jew was watching it." This is an extra halacha that it says that you milk, even if it's kosher, but if a Jew is not watching it, it's better not to drink this milk. It says we shouldn't. It's to keep our faith, to keep our strong connection, spiritual connection, is not to drink milk that is not Chalav Israel. So he said later that it says in the Mishnah that Chalav shechalvo akum ve'en Israel ro'eyo. That if there's milk that a non-Jew milked it and a Jew didn't watch him. So he interpreted the Mishnah saying in a little playing on words, he said, a milk that is milked by a non-Jew, a Jew doesn't see it. A Jew doesn't see it. What does it mean doesn't see it? He physically didn't see that milk. He really affected he perfected himself. He's trained his body to the point that he didn't see something that he's not supposed to see. It is really hard to understand, obviously. And it is something which is not in the level of each of the average Jew. But it is something that we can learn from. And that is that we should connect, and our lifetime mission is to work on everything what we see, to connect and to try to see what is the message, what is the lesson. As the Baal Shem Tov says, when you see something, you got to do something. When you see something, you connect. You don't just let it pass it by. So let's see the last text from the Frierdiker Rebbe. He says, a Hasidic Jew knows well the meaning of the word der Herren. We have discussed the difference between Herren and der Herren at length in the past. By Herren, listening, hearing, I don't just mean the mechanical act of listening with one's hearing organs. Simply hearing with one's ears doesn't mean one has really heard. It might just go in one ear and out the other, as they say. By Herren, I'm referring to the sense it is used in the verse, speak for your servant hears. I hear you. I hear you means I connect. Where the meaning of hear refers to understanding. It is the head that hears. It's not the ears that hear, the head that hears. That is, one hears with their powers of comprehension, as it says, the hear discerns words, which refers to understanding that which one hears. That is hearing. That's not der Herren. Der Herren, but der Herren is something else entirely. It is when the ear that hears conveys that insight, their deher, into every organ of their body. Says the Frierdiker Rebbe continues, and he says, the entire purpose of working on oneself is that there should be a deher. There is Herren and there is deher, and there is what we call der Herren. The hear is also important, but it's only hearing. You can hear one thing and then hear another, even if one contradicts the other. But der Herren, however, is to engage with a thing so that it matters and leaves no room for anything else, because he is so preoccupied with this. Just like you're not going to do something, you're not going to go kill someone. It's not just impossible. Or like the Jewish child is not going to take a piece of pork, chas v'shalom, and eat. It's not possible to even contemplate something. Therefore, the difference between hearing and der Herren is that hearing bears no results, while listening, he was engaged and did not hear anything else. But that is all. Practically is irrelevant. It is irrelevant. So this is the message that we go away with tonight. and it is a very powerful message. And I'm going to finish with a story, also a powerful story that demonstrates this thing. It was in the time of the Alter Rebbe. Was once a chassid, was a very generous chassid. He was very helping his family and supporting them. You know, back then there was a lot of poverty around, and then one day the wheel of fortune turned, and this chassid was no longer able to help them, and he felt very, very bad about it. He lost a lot, and he came to the Alter Rebbe, the first Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he came in and started, with a bitter heart. He said to the Rebbe, I need to help this family. I need to marry off my children, and I need to do this and then that and that. All good things. The Alter Rebbe looked at him, and he meditated for a while. And then he said, in a tune that he used to sing, the same tune, he says, Du sagst alles, was du darfst. You are saying everything what you need, but you're not saying what you are needed for. You're saying all that you need, but you're not saying what are you needed for. That chassid heard those words, and he fainted. Felt fainted. The chassidim got him up. They took him out. And when he came back to himself, to his strength, he sat down and he started working on his spiritual being. He started studying Torah for a long time. And to the point that at one point, he was there for a long time. And then someone told him that the Rebbe wants to see you, and he got scared. He says, "Oy vey, the Rebbe again wants to tell me how bad I am." So he came into the Rebbe again, and he came with a broken heart. And the Rebbe told him that what you did was amazing, and now you are refined. I'm paraphrasing, and the Rebbe explained to him that with his action, he says, "It's the du weißt, now that you feel, and you feel the emes Hashem le'olam, that the truth of God is hoya oiva v'hiyeh. Now you can go home, and that the emes," he says, the emes comes into a body in a soul. I'm sorry, the soul in a body. Now you can go home, and Hashem will help you, and you will be successful. Says the Frierdiker Rebbe that this chassid, anybody can hear a word like this from a Rebbe and say, you're saying everything what you need, and you're not saying what you are needed for. How would you take a criticism like this? So if you're sincere, you'll take it. You know what? I really have to, I have to change the way I speak. This chassid didn't take it that way. He was herring that message. He was really, really internalizing that message that he fainted. He fainted. He felt that this is so true that he's thinking about himself, not thinking about what is needed. And that made him instantly decide to change his life. And the Alter Rebbe saw this, that he changed. Indeed, he changed his life. And when he changed his life, everything changed. This is the herring. This is the connecting. So connect. Let's connect. Connect to everything we have in life. We should connect, obviously, first and foremost to Hashem, to the commandments, to the Torah, to the mitzvahs. Whatever we do, every mitzvah, we connect to Hashem. We make it not just as a habit. Okay, it's nice. I have a nice club, nice friends in the shul. I'm going to go. Connect to what you're doing. Connect to the mitzvah, and connect to your spouse. Not just back and forth. Connect to your children. We got to connect with them. When you connect with what you see, with what you come across, it changes everything. So, thank you for joining. And Be'ezrat Hashem, tomorrow morning we'll continue with a daily Tanya class, which is very interesting these days also. And if anybody has any comments, questions, then you can ask any questions. All the best.